The story begins with a group of adventurers fiercely battling a giant dragon. Despite their coordinated efforts, the dragon unleashes a devastating magical attack. Though they try to defend themselves with a protective shield, it shatters under the force of the blast, leaving one of the female adventurers injured. Dennis, the protagonist, steps forward and heals her using his magic. The dragon powers up even further, growing in both size and strength. In response, the group's leader, Vigor, rallies the team with a passionate declaration of their strength as the Silver Wing Guild. He refuses to retreat, declaring their resolve to defeat the cursed beast. Later, the adventurers gather around a meeting table. Dennis questions the purpose of an emergency summon, wondering why such a meeting was called. Vigor shifts the blame for their previous mission's failure onto Dennis, accusing him of making a critical mistake by using the Sound of Terror, an act that allegedly caused the cave dragon to escape. Dennis, clearly frustrated, reminds Vigor that it was his order to use that magic. However, Vigor denies giving any such command and instead insists that the mission's objective was to defeat the cave dragon and collect rare materials, something made impossible when the creature went berserk. Dennis recalls the events in the cave. The dragon had severely injured many team members, and at the time, Vigor had clearly instructed him to use the Sound of Terror. Though the mission failed when the dragon fled, Dennis had admired the decisiveness of that call. But now, he finds himself accused of sabotage, with Vigor even suggesting he might be a spy from a rival guild. Without further discussion, Dennis is expelled from the guild. The team is disheartened by his expulsion. Dennis agrees to leave, believing it's what the others want. Vigor adds insult to injury, calling Dennis's very presence, a cook among warriors, a mistake. Tension rises as both Dennis and Vigor prepare to fight, but Dennis, though angry, restrains himself and walks away. As Dennis wanders the city, he helps a young girl retrieve her runaway balloon by flying up to catch it. Meanwhile, Vigor secretly watches from a rooftop, murmuring to himself that it's finally time to set his mysterious plan in motion. As Dennis prepares to leave the city, his friend Katie chases after him. She pleads with him to stay, concerned that his departure will cause the collapse of essential operations like medicine-making and alchemy. Dennis assures her that others can take over. Despite her emotional appeal and efforts to convince him otherwise, Dennis remains resolved. He explains that he plans to cook, his one true skill, and open a restaurant. Before leaving, he thanks Katie for believing in him and for being the one who invited him to join the Silver Wing in the first place. Dennis travels to a new city to start fresh. He begins gathering restaurant supplies and nearly purchases a refrigerator but recalls a book he admires, How to Open a Restaurant, a guide for former adventurers. Choosing to rely on his own ice magic instead, he skips the refrigerator and chuckles at his own excitement. Determined to follow the guide, he focuses on saving costs by finding an old property to renovate and making contacts with distributors. He continues shopping, selecting a beautiful frying pan, and soon gathers everything needed for the restaurant, except customers. Knowing that good food alone isn't enough, Dennis realizes he needs help with daily tasks. He heads to the slave market, where a merchant is auctioning off a girl with noble features. The merchant explains that her family lost a political power struggle, leaving her displaced and ultimately sold. Dennis watches her closely, noting her beauty and suspecting that she truly might be of noble descent. A wave of regret washes over him. He wishes he could save her, but lacks the means to change the world. As the auction begins, bidding escalates quickly. Just as it seems out of reach, Dennis jumps in with a massive bid. A familiar face from earlier, the shopkeeper, enters the competition, raising the stakes further. Dennis suspects the man has unsavory intentions, which only fuels his determination. The bidding battle stretches on for over an hour. Eventually, Dennis wins the girl, spending every last coin he has. He takes her to a hairdresser to freshen her appearance. She looks even more stunning afterwards. They walk together through the city, and Dennis gently reminds her to stay close or risk getting lost. At one point, Dennis vanishes into the crowd, and the girl panics. City residents scold her for not paying attention, and fear takes over. But Dennis soon returns, apologizing for walking too fast. She asks why he bought her. Dennis simply says it reminded him of something from his past. When he asks for her name, or what she'd like to be called for now, she replies that he may call her slave. He refuses that and insists on a real name. She offers Atrielle. They begin forming a bond. Dennis tells Atrielle she's free to use the second floor however she wants, and if she ever wishes to leave, she can. Surprised by his kindness, Atrielle begins to realize just how hungry she is. Dennis prepares a meal for her. As she eats, it's clear she finds it incredibly delicious. She devours the food quickly, overwhelmed by the taste and perhaps by emotion, and tears begin to stream down her cheeks. Dennis quietly reflects that he doesn't know her past, and won't press her unless she chooses to share. When he asks if the food was good, Atrielle can't respond. She's choking slightly from eating too fast, and Dennis helps her. After the meal, Atrielle begins helping around the restaurant. She cleans, polishes the tables, and joins Dennis in preparing the place they decide to name the Adventurers Restaurant. They finish setting it up together, with hopes that it will bring them both a new beginning. Dennis appoints Atrielle as the restaurant's advertising girl, and she happily agrees. He checks everything one final time. The restaurant is ready. Suddenly, Suddenly, the door opens. Their first customer steps in, a man clad entirely in full armor, his face completely hidden. His identity remains a mystery. Who is he? What does he want? And why does he hide his face? Dennis recalls a piece of advice from the manual about running a restaurant. Some customers prefer privacy and should be allowed to enjoy their time without interruption. Respecting this, Dennis invites the armored guest to sit wherever they like and asks his assistant, Atrielle, to serve water. The armored customer silently reviews the menu while Dennis, internally hyped about serving his very first customer, wonders what the order will be. Surprisingly, the guest only points to a small rice and crystal umeboshi. Dennis gently tries to probe further, asking if they're a light eater or short on money. Eventually, it's revealed that they are indeed strapped for cash. Dennis offers a more fulfilling meal, a katsudon, which the guest initially refuses, panicked, claiming they can't afford it. But Dennis insists, stating he won't let his first customer settle for less. In a shocking twist, Dennis realizes the armored guest is actually a woman. As he prepares the meal, he learns she was kicked out of her party simply because she was a female swordsman, seen as weak and troublesome. Despite her level 23 status, which Dennis says is more than enough for the job, she explains that she's hiding her gender while trying to find a new party. She's inspired by a legendary female swordsman, Crimson Swiftsword, and clings to hope of finding a team who will accept her for her skills. Moved, Dennis offers the katsudon on the house, encouraging her to eat before it gets cold. She's hesitant, but grateful. One bite is all it takes. She's blown away by the food, quickly finishing it. Dennis tells her he'll ask his other customers if they know of a party looking for a lady swordsman, and she's touched by his kindness. He advises her to keep visiting the restaurant in case someone turns up, and she agrees, feeling hopeful again. Soon, a lively group of new customers raves about the food, from fried rice to wyvern Napolitan pasta, and one praises Atelier's cuteness. Dennis, amused by her stoic demeanor, compares her to a cat. When the group mentions they're an adventuring party, Dennis takes the opportunity to ask if they're looking for a swordsman, a woman in particular. They are. He describes the guest he just met as skilled and fun, and they agree to meet her the next day. That evening, Dennis breaks the good news to the armored girl. He cautions her to be careful in choosing a party, but she assures him she can't live in fear of every possibility. Meanwhile, two other female customers discuss a disturbing rumor, a party that recruits solo female adventurers, only to assault and abandon them in deep dungeons. Dennis overhears and connects the dots. It could be the same party he just introduced to armored girl. As Henrietta sets out with the group the next day, they claim it's a simple gathering quest and dodge her questions about the specifics. Inside the dungeon, she fights hard, but becomes exhausted. When she's vulnerable, one of the men uses magic to stun her. They betray her, revealing their cruel intentions. As she realizes her mistake and tries to scream, they prepare to assault her, but are suddenly interrupted. A man wearing a paper bag, wielding kitchen knives, bursts in and takes them down with expert precision. Henrietta catches a glimpse of her masked savior before passing out. The next day, she recounts the experience at the restaurant. She awoke at the Adventurers Guild, unable to thank the person who saved her. The attackers had been subdued, tied up, and left at the dungeon entrance. The guild later confirmed they were a criminal group. Reflecting on it all, she admits she needs to be more cautious when joining parties. Dennis blames himself, but she absolves him, and her growling stomach interrupts their chat. Though she insists she can't afford food, Dennis tells her to eat whatever she likes. She picks the most expensive meal, the Supreme Hagen steak set, then backtracks. But Dennis insists she must eat what she ordered. He even asks Atelier to join her for dinner. The two previous female customers return, happy to serve themselves water. They place their orders, and Dennis prepares the special steak set for Atelier and Henrietta. Both enjoy the meal immensely. The women then ask Dennis why the place was closed the day before, scolding him for taking 2 days off. Dennis brushes it off, saying he had some business to handle. Henrietta begins to suspect that Dennis may be the mysterious masked man who saved her, recognizing similarities in his movements and behavior. But before she can ask, another customer arrives, and Dennis turns his attention to them with his signature warm welcome. Welcome to the Adventurers Restaurant. The next day at the restaurant, Henrietta tries to talk to Dennis, but he's too focused on work and quickly cuts her off to take her order. After thinking for a bit, she chooses the sorcerer's ramen. Only after that does Dennis respond to her earlier question about whether she should hide her gender for future adventures. He tells her to live her own way to truly be herself. Inspired by his words, Henrietta removes all her armor and reflects on how fear of mistakes can make people lose themselves. Choosing instead to be authentic, she comes back out in her true outfit. Atelier gives her a thumbs up, and Dennis smiles in approval. Meanwhile, someone approaches the restaurant. Inside, Henrietta happily enjoys her meal, clearly moved by Dennis's advice. Dennis then shifts the conversation and asks Henrietta if she's planning to join another group and get back to work. She dodges the question, so he brings up her unpaid tab. At that moment, a young customer walks in, sits at the counter, and looks through the menu. Dennis greets the kid but can't tell their gender. Henrietta finds the child beautiful. Dennis asks the kid to inform him when ready to order. The kid says everything on the menu sounds vague. Dennis suggests katsudon, but the kid isn't in the mood for rice bowls. Henrietta offers pasta options, but the kid rejects them all. Dennis grows impatient, and Henrietta stops him from snapping. Atrielle recommends fried rice, which the kid accepts. Dennis prepares a special pancake fried rice dish with flair. The kid takes a bite and immediately falls in love with it. Dennis asks if the kid has something on their mind, noting the serious look from earlier. The kid opens up, venting frustration about how his old group lacked ambition and only cared about finishing quests for rewards. He was kicked out after calling the team out, but that's exactly what he wanted. He dreams of joining the Silver Wing and becoming the greatest magic user ever. Dennis, unimpressed with the arrogance, warns that being a solo genius doesn't make a great adventurer. The kid, named Vivia Strange, pays and says he'll be back for more shrimp fried rice. True to his word, Vivia returns the next day, announcing that he's joining the strongest local group, the Night Mist Troop. Dennis corrects his grammar and questions whether the group matches Vivia's level. Vivia isn't sure but is confident in his skills. Dennis sees spirit in the kid and admires the drive, hoping he finds a good team. When asked about his first job, Vivia says he's going to the dungeon's 5th floor to collect rare materials. Dennis, concerned, scans his level and finds it's only 17, while the recommended level is 30. He tries to caution Vivia, but the kid brushes it off, claiming elite support. Dennis suspects Vivia has overestimated himself by reading advanced magic books without mastering them. Dennis explains how levels reflect the quality and number of skills one possesses, and if Vivia had truly learned advanced spells, his level would be higher. Still, Vivia insists Dennis wouldn't understand what it's like to be a real adventurer. Dennis remembers his own time reaching the 37th floor. Vivia leaves after paying, planning to return for crab fried rice next time. Later, as Dennis and Atrielle walk through the market, Dennis worries about Vivia. They overhear adventurers saying Vivia was sent to the 5th floor alone as a rite of passage where many die. Enraged, Dennis beats the 2 Night Mist Troop members who reveal this and decides to act, telling Atrielle they'll have to close shop again. She wishes him luck. Meanwhile, Vivia is running for his life in the dungeon, overwhelmed and unable to recall his spells due to fear. A vine traps him, and just as goblins close in, a magical chain moves through him. A girl hides him in a wall cavity, saving him. Vivia thanks her, amazed at her powerful magic. The girl, Cynthia, says they aren't safe yet and reveals she too was abandoned by her group after a trap. She always felt like dead weight. Vivia admits his own flaws, his arrogance and how he ruins every team he joins. The two bond over their shared experiences. When goblins return, Vivia offers to act as bait so Cynthia can escape. She argues against it, but Vivia insists, saying he owes her his life. For the first time, he's ready to die for someone else. He steps out and uses a palm spell to hold the goblins back, but they break through. Suddenly, Dennis crashes down with a gigantic frying pan spell, steel, cutting off the goblins. Vivia mistakenly attacks until he hears Dennis's voice. Dennis scolds him for being reckless and prepares to leave. Vivia rushes back to the wall cavity to find Cynthia, only to discover she was just a skeleton all along. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Dennis and Vivia learn that Cynthia Dread was a 16-year-old mage who disappeared 13 years ago after being separated from her team on the 5th floor. They visit her grave and place flowers. Dennis mentions tales of adventurers' spirits saving others in labyrinths. Vivia cries and promises to keep visiting her and to become the #1 mage to help others like her. As they leave, Dennis promises a big plate of fried rice to cheer him up. Still shaken, Vivia wants a moment to be sad. Dennis gives him a firm pat on the back, reminding him that Cynthia's spirit won't rest if he stays down too long. Annoyed but understanding, Vivia says he knows and just needs time. Then, he feels Cynthia's magic flow through him one last time. He reflects that mysterious experiences were once called magic, and if so, Cynthia truly was a mage. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, a girl stands on the edge of a bell tower, questioning how things ended up like this. We soon learn why. Earlier that day, a man had berated her, demanding to know when she'd finally fix the reports she was behind on. Head down, the young girl could only mutter an apology. But that wasn't enough for him. Her co-workers just laughed, mocking her as she tried to explain that the mission reward numbers didn't add up. Instead of listening, her boss smacked her over the head with a stack of papers, telling her to redo everything. He even questioned if she was truly level 32. Because of that harsh scolding, Backhell had to stay late, long after everyone else had gone home. Trying to reconcile the discrepancies, she realized the error was in the item counts, a mistake likely made by someone senior to her. Still, she was the one fixing it. Adding to her misery, she had to wake up at 3 a.m. for a dawn mission. She hadn't eaten all day, no lunch, no dinner, and she was starving. Desperate, she decided to check if a restaurant she'd heard about might still be open. When she arrived, Atrielle was just closing up. For a moment, Bachel's hope faltered. But then Atrielle asked if she was a customer, giving her a lifeline. Atrielle asked Dennis, the chef, to prepare one final meal. Though reluctant, Dennis was persuaded by Henrietta and Vivia. Vivia. Embarrassed, Backstabbed took a seat at the counter and ordered the daily special. While Henrietta and Vivia chatted casually nearby, Backstabbed soaked in the warm atmosphere. For the first time in a while, her heart felt a little lighter. Normally, her rare days off were spent sleeping. She had no friends, no joy. But tonight felt different. When Dennis served the food, Backstabbed stared at the fried dish and unfamiliar sauce. She'd never seen anything like it. One bite, and her world changed. It was the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. Henrietta rattled off more dishes to try, like Vritra's katsudon and sorcery ramen. Dennis teased her about being the restaurant's first freeloader, which led to playful banter with him. The jokes made Backstabbed laugh, really laugh, for the first time in a long while. But then her emotions overwhelmed her, and tears followed. Everyone noticed, but no one mocked her. For once, she was surrounded by kindness, not cruelty. Her life hadn't always been this bleak. As a child, Backstabbed was a prodigy, a gifted mage praised by everyone in her village. The community even pooled their resources to send her to the city to study magic. She excelled, skipped grades, taught classes, and dreamed of joining the city's top adventurer guild to give back. But things didn't go as planned. That night, with those memories in her heart, she left the restaurant after just one bite. Vivia, concerned, mentioned to the others that she was part of the Night Mist troupe, the same group that once abandoned him. Realizing something was very wrong, they urged Dennis to help. But the chef only shook his head. He wasn't a hero, just a cook. All he could do was feed people. At 3 a.m., Bachel's alarm went off, but she hadn't slept. Groggy, she rushed to meet her team. They were furious at her lateness. Still, the dungeon mission began. Midway, they were ambushed by a werewolf. Backstabbed reacted instantly, blasting the beast away and saving a teammate. But instead of gratitude, the man she saved shoved her aside. After the mission, her teammates blamed her for the chaos and said cruel things, telling her everyone would be better off if she disappeared. Crushed, Backstabbed wandered the streets, her heart heavier than ever. Meanwhile, Henrietta and Vivia were walking and chatting about food when they spotted her. Realizing something was wrong, they followed her to the bell tower. Backstabbed was standing on the edge, lost in despair. Then, she jumped. Without hesitation, Henrietta dove after her, grabbing hold mid-air. Vivia cast a cushioning spell, softening their landing. Back at the restaurant, Atrielle stepped out of the bath only to find there were no towels, so she marched out completely drenched and naked, causing Dennis to panic and scramble for a solution. Moments later, Vivia and Henrietta returned, Backstabbed in tow. Dennis took one look and knew, this wasn't just physical exhaustion. It was something deeper. Mental illness. People often hid such pain until it consumed them. Vivia quipped that Henrietta would never face something like that, but when the girl laughed, Dennis realized how quickly she and Vivia had connected. Henrietta asked how Backstabbed could be cured. Dennis's answer, rest. But Vivia doubted she'd get any, being in the Night Mist troupe. So Dennis decided to speak with them directly. That evening, Captain Hopper and his squad arrived. Hopper apologized for the trouble, but Dennis said it was his fault too. He had knocked a few of them out once. Hopper wasn't impressed and made it clear his squad ruled this city. Dennis told him Backstabbed needed to be released. Hopper dismissed it. After all, they held custody of her. One of the squad members threw her contract on the table. Dennis, reading it, was horrified. The terms were inhumane. When the others mocked him, he lost his temper, calling them nothing but con artists. Hopper, offended, crushed his mug and warned Dennis, this city belonged to them. If Dennis didn't want trouble, he'd better hand Backstabbed over. Meanwhile, Backstabbed awoke feeling worse than ever, wondering why no one would just let her die. Atrielle calmly told her, if you want to die, you can. I once felt the same. I lost everything, my freedom, my identity, even my hope. But I didn't die because I found that life still had small joys. She urged Backstabbed to eat something first. Have something delicious. If you still want to die afterward, I won't stop you. But maybe you'll choose to live. Outside, Dennis challenged Hopper again. Hopper admitted it was true. In every dungeon city, the strongest guild held real power. Dennis reminded him they weren't Silver Wing. Hopper argued it was the same thing, only difference was the clientele. Suddenly, Katie the Crimson Lightning burst into the restaurant. Though it was closed, she barged in, thrilled to see Dennis again. She was all fiery energy, crimson armor, twin red swords, and the Silver Wing insignia. Hopper instantly recognized her, the vice-captain of the city's most powerful guild. When Katie revealed she and Dennis were former partners in Silver Wing, ring, everyone was stunned. Hopper realized he had severely underestimated the man. Without another word, he ordered Bachel's contract burned and stormed out. Katie, still fuming, asked if Dennis wanted her to kick Hopper out of town. Dennis calmed her down. She grumbled but admitted she liked that about him. As things settled, Atrielle requested the daily special for Backstabbed, who had finally gotten out of bed. Katie ordered the same. Dennis smiled. When the food arrived, Katie dove in with gusto, showing Backstabbed just how good life could be. Finally, Backstabbed tried her fried shrimp with special sauce. One bite, and it was like coming back to life. She kept eating, savoring every bite, realizing that sometimes, something as simple as a warm meal in a kind place can start to heal even the deepest wounds. After returning from her trip, Katie makes her way back to the Silver Wing base. Upon arrival, she finds her teammates, Piercing and Drooly, murmuring among themselves about how their captain, Vigor, has been in a terrible mood lately and how the team's missions have been slipping in quality. Distracted by her own thoughts, Katie walks straight into Vigor himself. The captain glares sharply at the gossiping duo before promptly sending them out for the day's mission. Then, turning to Katie, he brings up the fact that she recently visited Dennis. Katie responds honestly. She tells Vigor she had been missing Dennis's cooking, something she always found comforting and joyful. Nostalgia drew her there, and after tasting his food again, she felt compelled to ask Dennis to return to Silver Wing. She believes the team has started to unravel ever since his departure. But Dennis had no intention of coming back. He told her clearly that he's happy where he is and that he's left that life behind. Katie tries to make her point. Dennis was once the cornerstone of their support team. His absence left a gap that hasn't been filled, and resentment toward Vigor is growing among those who once relied on Dennis. But despite all that, Dennis is firm in his choice. He's content with his current life, even if his customers can be eccentric, and he's found peace in running a restaurant. He doesn't see himself as an adventurer anymore, just a chef. Vigor, unmoved, says he doesn't want Dennis back either and forbids Katie from seeing him again. Katie is stunned but gets no further explanation. Vigor ends the conversation abruptly. Meanwhile, Dennis's restaurant is packed with customers. Orders are piling up for his signature magic-infused ramen and Hagen yakisoba. Atrielle is sprinting around, taking orders and managing the chaos with efficiency, proving she's no slacker. Vivia observes that the place is thriving, and Henrietta agrees. It's hard to resist Dennis's food. Just then, Vivia is taken aback to see Backstabbed now working at the restaurant. Backstabbed explains that she's moved in and wants to help out, grateful for her friends who kept visiting her when she wasn't well. Vivia cautions her not to push herself too hard. Backstabbed admits that staying busy actually keeps her calm, and she's especially motivated with Atrielle, her mini-wise senior, by her side. Dennis praises them, saying they make a great team, something Henrietta enthusiastically agrees with. Dennis brings out shrimp dishes for Henrietta and Vivia. As soon as they take a bite, their reactions are nothing short of divine. They practically worship the shrimp. Henrietta declares herself a loyal regular, but Dennis calls her out, saying she's more of a freeloader since she hasn't paid her tab. Henrietta, embarrassed, blames the economy, but Dennis isn't amused. He warns her to settle her debt before it becomes a bigger problem. Trying to change the topic, Vivia asks Dennis how he handles such a huge crowd. Dennis gives credit to Atrielle for keeping things running so well. Backstabbed notices that Atrielle has been unusually cheerful and wonders if something good happened. At that moment, Dennis drops a bowl and suddenly becomes serious. He turns to Vivia and asks him to visit the restaurant on his next day off. He needs his advice. When Henrietta tries to jump in with her own suggestions, Dennis quickly shuts her down. Vivia agrees, still unsure what Dennis is so worked up about. Henrietta, meanwhile, is crushed. Not only was she excluded from Dennis's private talk with Vivia, but she's also feeling hopeless in general. She's broke, out of work, and doesn't even have hot water at home. She misses the public baths but can't afford them anymore. Worst of all, she believes Dennis and Vivia might be conspiring to ban her from the restaurant, and she's determined not to let that happen. On Dennis's day off, Vivia arrives. Dennis nervously confides in him. He thinks Atrielle might have a boyfriend. Since he started giving her an allowance, she's been going out more often. Recently, he saw her talking to a boy, and the idea is driving him crazy. He insists that if the boy truly respected him, he would have brought a gift for his potential father-in-law, like a box of sweets. And unless the guy's over level 80, Dennis refuses to accept him. Just then, Atrielle walks in, curious about their conversation. Dennis freezes, and Vivia quickly makes up a story about them discussing cooking. Excited, Atrielle says she wants to learn more and prepares to join them in the kitchen. Dennis begins begins a cooking lesson, showing them how to slice onions for Vritra's katsudon. As tears start rolling from the onion sting, Dennis recalls a memory of his mother teaching him the same skill. Back then, she caught him secretly using a magic ability to avoid the tears. She smiled knowingly, reminding him that a mother always notices. Snapping back to the present, Dennis finds Atrielle has dropped eggshells into the bowl. He helps clean it up, and the three of them end up working together, their teamwork feeling warm and familial. After they finish cooking, Dennis praises Atrielle for doing well on her first try. Vivia tries to show off his own culinary talents, but Dennis stays focused on Atrielle, much to Vivia's annoyance. Suddenly, the city bell rings. Atrielle says she's heading out for a walk, but doesn't say where. After she leaves, Backstabbed wakes up. Dennis gives her a shopping list and tells her to get ingredients. Vivia points out that one of the katsudon dishes was meant for him, but Dennis ignores it. When Henrietta bursts in announcing she passed a test to join an adventurer group, Dennis immediately ropes her into joining Backstabbed on the shopping trip and leaves with Vivia. At the market, Dennis and Vivia spot Atrielle talking to an elderly woman. Dennis tries to justify that he's only observing her as a guardian, but Vivia teases that he's acting like a stalker. They continue spying as they watch Atrielle chat with a boy and follow him into a jewelry shop, causing Dennis to panic. He assumes she's picking out a wedding ring. Vivia decides they need to hear what's happening. Meanwhile, Backstabbed notices that Henrietta looks troubled. Henrietta confesses that she's overwhelmed by her debt to Dennis. Backstabbed doesn't get how an adventurer like her has no money. Henrietta explains that expenses for gear and healing potions drain her earnings. Still, she genuinely wants to repay Dennis. Backstabbed appreciates her sincerity and comforts her with a hug. Then, they overhear two passers-by gossiping about a local adventurer group, the Night Mist Troop, being publicly embarrassed by a restaurant manager, rumored to be a former Silver Wing member. The two girls exchange a worried glance, sensing potential trouble. Back near the jewelry shop, Vivia uses a magical megaphone to listen in on the conversation. They hear Atrielle say emotionally charged lines about how beautiful something is, how much she loves it, and how grateful she is to have met someone. Dennis loses it, convinced she's confessing her love. Suddenly, a thief uses wind magic to snatch an old woman's purse. Dennis snaps into action, dashing after the thief with Vivia still slung over his shoulder. The thief tries to escape by leaping across rooftops using wind magic. But Dennis, using no magic at all, keeps up purely through skill and determination. Vivia supports him by casting a spell called Palm, creating trampoline-like platforms to help Dennis keep pace. Eventually, they nearly catch him, but the thief slips away again. Dennis warns Vivia he might drop him mid-chase, but insists he'll land safely. Flying through the market, they bump into Henrietta and Backstabbed. The thief crashes into them, and that's his mistake. Henrietta seizes the chance and stops him with a precise strike. Dennis arrives, impressed. Henrietta feels proud. This moment is the perfect way to repay the kindness Dennis once showed her. Back at the restaurant, Dennis is still unsure whether Atrielle was actually confessing to someone. Backstabbed mentions that Henrietta was terrified about being banned from the restaurant, but Dennis laughs, saying he'd never turn away someone who loves his food so much. Still, he warns freeloaders not to test his patience. Then Atrielle returns. The entire restaurant goes quiet. She approaches Dennis and hands him a gift, a gemstone matching the color of his eyes. Dennis is stunned. When Henrietta almost blurts out that Dennis had been spying, he jokingly threatens to ban her for real. Atrielle asks him to wear the bracelet, and when he does, he's overwhelmed with happiness. Tears well up in her eyes as she hugs his leg, a quiet, powerful expression of love and belonging. Meanwhile, Captain Vigor is shown heading toward a mansion, on his way to meet someone he hasn't seen in a long time. The next day, after closing time at the restaurant, Dennis asks Atrielle to clean outside, but a man in a butler's uniform walks in, kneels before her in tears, and calls her, "My lady." He introduces himself as Stevens, servant of the prestigious mage family, House of Workstadt. Stevens reveals Atrielle is the rightful heir to the family, disinherited years ago when her uncle Joseph claimed she wasn't of their bloodline. Lord Famaza's newly discovered will proves otherwise, and the royal court now wants her back. But Atrielle refuses, until Dennis agrees to go with her. Vivia tags along, while Henrietta and Backstabbed stay behind. In the royal capital, lawyer Sestovich explains they'll confirm her lineage using a magical sphere. The first test proves she's Lord Famaza's daughter, and also Lady Eliza's. But in court, Joseph's lawyer claims her mother was a mistress. A A random draw picks Stevens to run the test again. This time, the sphere first confirms her father but then rejects Eliza as her mother. The judge rules Joseph keeps the wealth and power, while Atrielle only gets the family's books. But Dennis spots blood on Stevens's hand, proof he tampered with the test under Joseph's orders. The lottery had been rigged all along. Sestovich takes them to the family's neglected library, where Atrielle accidentally reveals a hidden chamber filled with priceless magical works, possibly what Lord Famas wanted her to have from the start. She decides to bring them back to the restaurant for everyone to use, shocking Vivia but amusing Dennis. The next day, as they prepare to leave the capital, Vivia passes a man in a cape and top hat who looks exactly like Dennis. The man, Heath, tells his companion Fiorenza that this was a friend of his counterpart. The next day, the line outside the restaurant nearly wrapped around the block. Inside, Henrietta and Vivia enjoyed their meal, delighted to see the place filled with mages and scholars, no doubt drawn in by the rare books Atrielle had inherited. One wizard cracked open a volume and realized it belonged to the definitive collection coveted by the greatest sorcerers alive. Another was stunned to find a copy of the Necrofico itself. Seeing their excitement, Dennis told them he didn't mind if they read while eating, so long as they left once they were done. In the middle of the rush, a nervous customer approached the chef, saying he might be able to cure his wife's illness by studying the complete works of Munglemore. Dennis immediately called over to Atrielle. Hearing the man's plight, she granted him a special one-time lending permit. The grateful husband clutched the book, thanked them deeply, and left. When others tried to borrow books too, Dennis firmly refused. Moments later, more orders poured in. The chef worked at lightning speed, flawlessly remembering every request, while unleashing all his magic to keep up. Vivia asked if it was wise to use so many spells at once. Dennis replied there was no other choice. Atrielle could only watch in awe. The scene shifted to an old memory of a small abandoned child wandering the rainy streets while other children walked by smiling under their umbrellas. This one had no protection except a ragged cloak and was forced to eat scraps of meat left on the ground. Soaked and shivering, the child sat there in silent misery as the rain dripped down their head. Then a woman passing by dropped her wallet. The child picked it up and returned it to her. Moved by the boy's kindness, the woman took him to the restaurant where she worked for something to eat. He didn't even know how to hold a spoon properly. But the moment he tasted the food, it was as if his whole world had burst into color. The joy was so overwhelming, he couldn't stop eating, tears streaming down his face. Back in the present, Dennis awoke after fainting, fever burning. The kids stopped him from getting up, Backstabbed insisting they'd already closed for the day. Atrielle placed an ice bag on his forehead. Vivia explained she'd been worried sick, fearing the worst. Dennis chuckled, assuring them it was just a cold, though Vivia suspected overwork, noting he hadn't rested since returning from the capital. They agreed he needed medicine and rest. Everyone left, except Atrielle, who refused to leave the side of the man who was like a father to her. In the dining area, the others decided to help by making rice porridge. Henrietta suited up in armor to cook, but her mind drifted to grilled meat instead. Vivia stopped her from turning the kitchen into a disaster. Backstabbed entered with ice just as Sestovich burst in, curious about the commotion. Upstairs, Atrielle still tended to Dennis, blaming herself for his exhaustion. He had given his all in court to save her, and she was grateful beyond words. Another memory, of Dennis as a mischievous boy taken in by the restaurant's head chef. He once proudly presented fried rice to a customer, only for her to nearly spit it out. The head chef corrected it with a simple spell, teaching him the importance of listening and mastering the right magic. She told him he could become a fried rice master someday, and his spirit soared. In the present, Sestovich learned about the porridge plan and, like a sage, began a deep debate on the magic needed to cook perfect rice. Backstabbed favored flame magic, Vivia warned of inconsistency, and Sestovich suggested ghost flame for precision. Vivia countered that ghost flame lacked the golden crust. Backstabbed proposed combining flames, but Vivia argued it would destabilize the heat again. Finally, they settled on using both flames with an alchemist's catalyst pot to maintain temperature. Before they could test it, Polvo the pervert appeared with a magical rice box, half price, with a special porridge mode. To their embarrassment, he pointed out that porridge is made by boiling raw rice directly. They abandoned their complex plan and bought the device. When Atrielle reported Dennis's fever was down, she suggested adding eggs for extra nutrition. Later, Dennis awoke to find Atrielle bringing him egg porridge. One bite filled him with the same warmth he'd felt as a boy in the Black's restaurant. Smiling, she told him she'd whisked the eggs exactly as he'd taught her, like slicing. But when she revealed that Polvo had made the porridge itself, the tender moment instantly collapsed, leaving the chef in quiet panic. A few days later, Henrietta is strolling happily through the marketplace. She greets everyone she passes, young and old, old, with a radiant smile. Along the way, she bumps into Vivia, who notices the large bag she is carrying. Henrietta explains with excitement that she has brought plenty of things for the feast today. As they continue walking, they come across a familiar fruit and vegetable vendor. The vendor remarks that it is rare to see them away from Dennis's restaurant at lunchtime. Henrietta explains that the adventurer's restaurant is temporarily closed, and Vivia adds that today is a special occasion. The scene shifts to the restaurant, where Dennis asks Atrielle and Backstabbed if they are ready. Backstabbed confidently replies that they are, while Atrielle simply flashes a victory sign. Dennis teases Atrielle, reminding her she won't need her apron where they are going, but she insists it is fine. At that moment, Henrietta and Vivia arrive. Henrietta insists on doing a quick check, making sure everyone has their towel, soap, and bucket before they all head off to the communal bath. Inside the men's section, Vivia is impressed by Dennis's muscular body, comparing his lats to steel. Dennis teases Vivia for being so scrawny, but Vivia shrugs it off, saying that as a wizard, he doesn't need muscles. He admits he can't understand how Dennis has built such a physique. Dennis explains that doing 2,000 handstand push-ups a day creates such results, leaving Vivia convinced Dennis isn't human. Dennis reminds him that this is supposed to be naked bonding time, and questions why Vivia is still wearing a towel. Vivia simply replies that he is the towel-wearing type. Meanwhile, in the women's section, Backstabbed comments that the men sound like they are having fun. Henrietta admires Atelier's silky hair, and Backstabbed then turns to Henrietta, admiring her figure. When Henrietta asks what she means, Backstabbed explains that her body has a much greater impact compared to hers. Henrietta downplays the difference, but Atrielle glances at her own chest in disappointment. Later, everyone gathers outside for the feast. Dennis asks Henrietta to start things off. Nervously, she thanks everyone for taking care of her until now, and reveals that she has found a new job with the Knights. Dennis then turns to Vivia, who announces that he has joined a new party. It isn't a large one, but it is his first step toward becoming a powerful wizard. Finally, Backstabbed shares that she will return home for a while before heading to the capital to work as a magic school instructor. They all raise their glasses in celebration of their fresh starts. In a quiet moment, Vivia admits that it feels lonely with everyone leaving. Henrietta even considers delaying her assignment, and Backstabbed agrees. But Dennis firmly reminds them not to let go of their dreams. With the mood restored, he takes over the cooking, dazzling everyone with his culinary skills. Everyone gathers around, their mouths watering, knowing that anything Dennis makes will be delicious. Just then, Polvo, the eccentric general store owner, appears, drawn by the smell. He exclaims that he has never eaten fried rice this good in his life. Dennis immediately recognizes him, and calls him the pervy general store owner. Polvo protests, but is delighted when Atrielle remembers his name. He even tries to recruit her, but Dennis playfully knocks him on the head, warning him not to steal their poster girl. Polvo then reveals he has brought a special treat, premium A5 Hagen meat, for their barbecue. Seeing the meat makes Henrietta, Vivia, and Backstabbed drool in anticipation. Dennis takes out his knives, and when Polvo's girls toss the meat into the air, he slices it perfectly, landing it on the plate. As everyone eats, Polvo mutters jealously that he had really only wanted to treat Atrielle. When Atrielle feeds Dennis by hand, Polvo gets jealous, until she feeds him too, which instantly cheers him up. Later, while the girls wash dishes, Vivia asks if Dennis is connected to the Blacks restaurant, since the court had called him Dennis Blacks. Dennis admits that he was raised by the head chef of the Blacks family, who allowed him to use the name. But after an argument, he left around level 90, believing he could reach level 100 on his own. He traveled everywhere to prove himself, and eventually joined the Silver Wing Battalion, where he stayed the longest. Still, he never reached level 100. Meanwhile, two of Dennis's regular customers arrive at the restaurant, only to find it closed. Some men approach, quarrel with them, and even hit them. The girls fight back with magic, but then they notice smoke coming from the restaurant. Dennis and his friends see the fire from a distance and rush over. When Dennis arrives, he finds his restaurant in flames, with people trying to put it out. The two girls point out the men responsible. Vivia recognizes them as members of the Night Mist group. One of the men tells Dennis that he is too arrogant, and that this is his punishment, not just from them, but also from the Night Mist, the Silver Wing Battalion, and the House of Workstat. All of them want Dennis destroyed. When the fire is finally extinguished, Dennis and his friends step inside the charred restaurant. Memories of better times overwhelm him. His companions blame themselves, Vivia for dragging Dennis into his troubles, Henrietta and Backstabbed for their part as well. But Dennis tells them they did nothing wrong. He realizes that Silver Wings involvement likely came through orders passed down by Joseph Workstadt. It was the Night Mist troop that carried out the arson, but the true order came from above. He admits that he got too cocky. Vivia insists they should fight back together, but Dennis refuses. He tells them he will simply open a small restaurant in another town, as he is tired of fighting. Everyone protests, but Dennis explains that while he may be strong enough, the others still need training. With powerful noble houses, elite adventurers, and strong henchmen united against them, they cannot win. He takes Atrielle with him and leaves. Vivia shouts in frustration, demanding to know what happened to the old Dennis, the one who would defy the whole kingdom for Atelier's sake. Dennis replies that he has finally come to his senses. Later, he returns to the burnt restaurant and retrieves money from the unharmed safe. Atelier asks if he is truly sure about not seeking revenge, but Dennis insists that fighting would only bring casualties, so he chooses to walk away. Meanwhile, his friends stand outside the ruins, grief written on their faces, as a hostile gang approaches towards them. Back with Dennis and Atelier, she asks if she can stay by his side, saying she never wants to see him sad. Dennis tells her that such things happen in life, but together they will endure. They bump fists, promising to always remain united. Dennis assures her that when things calm down, they will return to this town. Atelier nods, saying no matter what, they will come back here. When Dennis and Atelier leave the second floor and step out of the ruined restaurant, they find their friends waiting outside. Their expressions are strange, and they are surrounded by townsfolk who had gathered little by little, ordinary citizens drawn by the tragedy. Backhell explains that she couldn't simply let the two of them sneak off alone in the middle of the night. Henrietta teases him, calling him a coward. But Vivia points out that Dennis is the type of man who can't stand seeing others get hurt, yet is far too careless about hurting himself. Vivia then explains that everyone gathered there because of the chef, because of what he means to the community. If Dennis is sad, then so are they, just like the children he took in at his restaurant. Dennis himself had once been cast out from his group, which created a deep bond between them. Now they are like a family, and that means Dennis belongs with them. He can't just turn his back on that. Polvo vows he will never forgive anyone who dares lay a hand on Atelier. Meanwhile, Pigtails and Ponytail insist they couldn't live without the chef's food. Faced with the overwhelming support of the townsfolk, Dennis is deeply moved. Memories of moments with the children flash through his mind. When Atelier tugs at his clothes, Dennis understands what he must do. He doesn't want to be called a coward ever again. Seeing him talk to her directly, Henrietta blushes and quickly tries to cover up, saying she never meant to call him a coward. She changes the subject, suggesting they choose a name for their group. Atelier proposes, the Outcast's restaurant. Dennis finds the name a little sad, but since everyone else loves it, they settle on it. Vivia then asks their leader to say a few words. Dennis steps forward and declares to his companions, and to the townsfolk gathered, that they will crush the villains responsible for the restaurant's destruction. Evil will not prevail in their city. Since their enemies dared to provoke them, the Outcasts will strike back with everything they have. Fired up by his words, everyone raises their fists in the air. But when Vivia asks what the strategy will be, Dennis freezes, realizing he hasn't thought that far ahead. At that moment, Katie appears, distraught that she hadn't arrived in time to prevent the disaster. She apologizes for what Silver Wing did to the restaurant, since her group is directly tied to the crime. Earlier, she had seen Captain Vigo plotting to burn the place down, and rushed to warn Dennis, but she was too late. She takes responsibility for failing to reach him in time. Even when Dennis presses her for details, Katie refuses to reveal more. As Silver Wing's vice captain, her duty is to protect her teammates, and she can't betray them. With that said, she turns to leave. Dennis realizes she is already burdened enough with Vigo's madness, and that he had pushed her too far. But then Katie changes her mind, and decides to open up. The next scene shifts to dawn, with the Outcasts traveling in a caravan of carriages along a country road. Along the way, the children learn that Dennis was raised by Jean Blacks, the level 100 head chef of the Blacks restaurant. Hearing this shocks the group, as level 100 is the highest a human can possibly achieve. Ordinary people can usually reach level 60, rare talents might reach 80, and only a select few ever make it past 90. Reaching 100 is considered nearly impossible. Those who achieve such mastery are known as sovereign rank, living monuments of humanity. Among them are Yuzit, the ancestor of magic and king of strange devices, Natura, the ancestor of adventure and sovereign of exploration, and Young Free, the ancestor of skills and the first king. To think that Jean stands alongside such legendary figures feels unreal. Dennis tries to calm the boy down, saying he understands, but explains that Jean only mastered the culinary arts. Her combat ability is far weaker than his own. As a chef, however, she is unmatched, and commands influence throughout the royal capital. To Dennis, there could be no better ally. The real challenge will be gaining her support without being thrown out first. Before long, the outcasts arrive in the capital with their fellow travelers. It's time to put Dennis's plan into action. Each member of the team splits up across the city, all dressed in white cloaks. With 2 companions, Vivia heads to a tailor's shop and places an unusual order. Using his charm, he wins over the shopkeeper, who agrees without asking questions. From there, the trio moves on to assist the others. Meanwhile, Backstabbed, accompanied by Ponytail, Pigtail, and others, takes charge of contacting the city's greatest sages and mages. Though the girls worry they won't be welcomed, Backstabbed reassures them it will work if they stick to the plan. Henrietta, on the other hand, updates Sestovich on recent events. But the lawyer explains that even if criminals confess, and the captain of the Night Mist is arrested, Nightwing's ties to royalty and nobility would make true justice difficult. Henrietta insists she has a plan to turn the tables. Elsewhere, Polvo is busy ordering his companions around, making them count and memorize tables and chairs stacked on the cart. Yet he does little work himself. Soon, he grows bored, and starts bothering Atrielle, who quietly examines an oddly shaped object. Polvo notices it carries wind magic, but when he tries it out, he finds it broken. Just then, a man approaches Atrielle, calling her the girl with the grimoires. She recognizes him immediately, the man who once begged for a book at the restaurant to learn a healing spell. Thanks to that, he had saved his wife. Now, filled with gratitude, he returns the grimoires, and thanks her with all his heart. Not stopping there, he asks how he can help. Though unassuming, he reveals himself as a skilled mage capable of wielding nearly every advanced wind spell. With his expertise, Atrielle and Polvo gladly welcome him into their efforts. As the hours pass, each group fulfills their responsibilities, every member playing a crucial role in Dennis's larger strategy. Yet the one still missing is Dennis himself. Finally, he arrives at the restaurant where he had spent so much of his life. Standing outside, he recalls the day he argued with Jean, insisting he had nothing left to learn, and walking out without a goodbye. When he pushes the door open, 2 employees inside freeze in shock. Recognizing him instantly, the waitress shouts his name, Dennis Blacks, the former Sua's chef. The entire restaurant reacts as if a celebrity has just walked in, asking where he has been and what he has been doing. Even the cook Dennis used to prank as a child rushes to calm the chaos. Dennis asks to speak with the head chef. To his surprise, Mochi appears. Seeing her attire, he assumes she has become the new sous chef. She shakes her head, explaining that she is only filling in for the one who truly belongs there. She leads Dennis to Jean and leaves them alone. Dennis watches the woman who raised him, her back turned as she works. Scratching his head, he struggles to find words, and finally just asks how she is doing. Recognizing his voice, Jean turns, smiles, and affectionately calls him her fried rice idiot. She remarks that he looks better than before, and asks if he has found his answer. Dennis admits he hasn't. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he will never reach level 100. He has chased after so much, lived through so many experiences, yet still hasn't attained that height. Jean listens, but instead of addressing that, she asks why he has really returned. Dennis explains that Katie, a member of Silver Wing, told him about a gathering of powerful figures, presiding judge of the royal court, the current head of the House of Workstadt, Joseph Workstadt, Hopper, commander of the Night Mist troop, and Vigo, captain of Silver Wing. Katie, also known as Crimson Lightning, had shared this absent-mindedly before walking away, but she hoped he might intervene. Jean repeats the names quietly, muttering that nothing good could come from such a meeting of scoundrels. Dennis knows it spells trouble, and that is exactly why he came. He needs information from Jean, because with her reputation as the kingdom's greatest chef, she has the connections to learn the time and place of the dinner. Jean asks what he intends to do with that knowledge. As a chef, she cannot condone disrupting a place meant for dining. Dennis instinctively touches the bracelet Atrielle gave him, and with a heavy sigh, admits that he knows better than anyone it is the worst possible thing he could do. Jean never expected Dennis to go so far for a single goal. In her eyes, he had always been the type to give up easily on everything in life. Curious, she asked why he kept insisting this time. At that moment, Dennis remembered the people who had entered his life, the ones who encouraged him to do the right thing and to keep moving forward. As his hand brushed against the bracelet Atrielle had given him, he answered that he was doing it for everyone who loved his food and his restaurant. Satisfied with that response, Jean remarked that Dennis seemed to have discovered many new things about life. Dennis admitted he still barely understood what he was doing, but for some reason, he felt an undeniable need to keep moving ahead. Jean then promised to grant her former assistant's request, as long as he listened carefully to her words. Dennis knew well how much Jean had given him: an education, a roof over his head, and even the skills that would one day allow him to become a chef. Yet there was still one thing she had never taught him, the final piece he needed to reach level 100. The last secret. When he finally learned what it was, Dennis left with a heavy heart, thinking about how much easier life could have been if he had known this sooner. That same night, Mochi handed Dennis the notes Jean had written about the dinner he was investigating. With everything he needed in hand, Dennis gathered his allies, preparing to strike the following day. The next morning, as Vigo prepared to leave for his appointment, Katie acted as though she had no idea what it was about. She stopped him briefly, only to ask where he was headed. He repeated that it was nothing more than a dull and meaningless responsibility. Katie simply patted his shoulder and wished him luck. Once she left, Vigo climbed into the carriage that would take him to a luncheon with several of the kingdom's most powerful figures. Sitting inside, he told himself that the meeting was indeed pointless, but what mattered most was where he wanted to be afterward. Vigo's life began in hardship. After his father died and his mother abandoned him, he worked tirelessly to care for his sick younger brother. Though helped at times by kind nobles, Vigo grew resentful, believing he was manipulating others' pity. His darker nature surfaced when he brutally killed the noble lady's dog, Noah, out of envy and hatred. When blamed on his brother, Vigo confessed and took the punishment himself, but soon exacted revenge by burning down the noble family's mansion. Ambitious and merciless, Vigo abandoned his brother and dedicated himself to becoming stronger. His skill eventually earned him a place in the Silver Fang troop, where Captain Gadius named him second in command. But Vigo's thirst for power never stopped. He betrayed Gadius by luring him to his death, then seized control of the troop. Under his leadership, the group fractured, as Vigo cared only about status and recognition from nobles. Left alone, he rebuilt with new allies like Katie the Crimson Lightning, renaming the troop the Silver Wing Battalion and vowing that one day it would rule the kingdom. Now, in the present, Vigo arrived at the hotel where the secret meeting was held. The banquet hall was concealed, curtains drawn, the entire building reserved for this gathering. Lord Joseph, head of House Workstadt, found such caution excessive. He mocked his niece Atrielle for daring to stand against him. Vigo, however, reminded them that her restaurant had already been reduced to rubble, and he thanked Hopper for his excellent work. The judge of the royal court, their most powerful ally, promised them complete protection from suspicion. But Joseph's ambitions went beyond safety. He wanted absolute power, the ability to control the kingdom from the shadows. With both political and military influence in his grasp, even the royal family would be no obstacle. And ironically, he admitted, it was all thanks to Dennis Blacks. If not for that cook, he would never have met the powerful men now gathered at the table. In the middle of their plotting, Vivia appeared disguised as a butler. Vigo tried to dismiss him, but Joseph allowed it. Vivia revealed a plate of fried rice. Though considered a poor man's meal, once Joseph tasted it, he was captivated. The judge and Hopper soon followed, equally enthralled. Joseph demanded more and insisted on hiring the chef who made it. As Vivia left, Vigo seethed. To him, Joseph was nothing but a pig who stole power, Hopper a low-born thug, and the judge a corrupt parasite. In his eyes, they were merely stepping stones. One day, he would destroy them and claim the glory of saving the kingdom, securing himself a noble title. Eventually, he even planned to dethrone the king and rule all neighboring lands. But then he tasted the rice and recognized its flavor. By the time he realized whose cooking it was, Dennis stormed into the room with a bag over his head as a disguise. Politely, he served the dish and introduced himself as the legendary fried rice. Removing the bag, he rejected Joseph's offer to hire him, saying his only goal was to open another restaurant, the last one having been burned down by Joseph's order. Furious, Joseph commanded Hopper and Vigo to kill him. Vigo drew his sword, warning Dennis that attacking such men was suicide. But Dennis didn't care. Using magic to project his voice, he filled the room with a dreadful power, forcing everyone but Vigo to their knees. Joseph broke first, begging to grant Dennis whatever he wanted in exchange for mercy. Dennis demanded the names of those behind the destruction of his restaurant. At first, Joseph admitted only to giving the order, but under the crushing weight of Dennis's voice, he revealed everything, even betraying Hopper and the High Judge. Dennis turned to Vivia, asking if the plan had worked. Pulling back the curtains, Vivia confirmed it had gone perfectly. Joseph's confession had been broadcast to the entire courtyard through a magical device. Vigo lunged forward with his sword, but Vivia escaped just in time. Looking down at the crowd below, Vigo realized the truth. And Dennis, standing above them all, welcomed him to the traveling, open-air adventurer's restaurant. Vigo is furious, demanding to know why all the royal capital's mages have gathered. The mages step forward and accuse him of conspiring with the judge to burn down Dennis's restaurant, an act that also destroyed their treasured grimoires. They declare that they cannot stand idly by after such a crime. Dennis then reminds Vigo that the laws of this nation are upheld by mages and sages, meaning they will be the ones to judge him. Sestovich takes the lead, and after careful deliberation, the mages declare Vigo guilty. They also expose and dismantle his corrupt allies. Enraged, Vigo watches as his carefully laid plans collapse before his eyes. Dennis, on the other hand, mocks him, saying it serves him right. The tension between the two reaches its peak, and it is clear they are about to clash in an all-out battle. Both draw their magical weapons, and the fight begins. Their skills appear evenly matched, though Vigo gradually gains the upper hand. In the middle of their fierce duel, the story flashes back to the day Dennis and Vigo first met. Katie introduced Dennis to Vigo, and the moment Vigo laid eyes on him, he used his appraise skill, immediately discovering Dennis's greatest ability, cooking. Scoffing, Vigo dismissed him as nothing more than a chef. Dennis took offense, ready to respond, but Katie quickly stepped in to calm things down. She told Vigo that Dennis's cooking was incredible and that he would be a valuable addition to their team. Though unimpressed at first, Vigo reluctantly agreed, allowing Dennis to join the Silver Wing under one condition: he had to prove his worth through hard work. From that day on, Dennis officially became a member of the Silver Wing. A few days later, the group ventured into a dungeon, where they defeated a powerful monster, one that only Vigo was strong enough to kill. After the battle, it was time to eat. Dennis proudly presented a massive slab of meat, announcing that he would make hamburgers for dinner. Katie and the others were thrilled. While Dennis prepared the meal, Vigo told him to hurry up, warning that a much stronger monster likely lurked deeper in the cave. Dennis questioned why he cared, since their mission was already complete. Vigo shrugged, saying it was boring to just follow orders. Placing his sword aside, he asked Dennis why he was so determined to reach level 100. Dennis hesitated, unable to give a clear answer. Before he could respond, the meat began to burn, pulling his attention back to cooking. Soon, the meal was ready, and everyone dug in eagerly. Katie, in particular, was delighted. Seeing their joy filled Dennis with pride. Even Vigo tasted the meal and, to everyone's surprise, admitted it was delicious. Katie immediately asked for seconds, and while Dennis served her more food, she sincerely thanked him. She explained that thanks to his potions, which he had been secretly brewing and supplying, the Silver Wing had been thriving. Dennis was surprised, but Katie's words made clear how much he had contributed. Even Vigo, though unwilling to admit it outright, was grateful. Dennis's kindness extended far beyond cooking or brewing potions. When a fellow member was dismissed for slacking off, Dennis stopped him before he left, and handed him a small bundle of rice balls, wishing him luck on his new path. The simple yet heartfelt gesture left a deep impression on everyone. Weeks later, Dennis, Vigo, and Katie stood before nobles to apologize after failing a quest. Instead of being angry, the nobles mocked them, joking that it would have been more entertaining if one of them had died. Vigo's temper flared, and he was ready to unleash his magic on them, but Dennis stepped in quickly and calmed him down. That evening, back at the diner, Vigo vented his frustration, slamming his fist on the table. He raged that the nobles showed their party no respect, swearing that one day he would make them kneel before him. Dennis, however, seemed completely indifferent. He simply bit into his fried chicken, more focused on enjoying his food than on thoughts of revenge. The scene shifts back to the present, where Dennis and Vigo's brutal battle rages on. This time, Vigo overwhelms Dennis. With his destructive skill, he shatters Dennis's kitchen knives in a single strike. Shocked, Dennis retreats, realizing that another direct hit would kill him instantly. Determined, he uses his magic to heighten his senses and repair his weapon. With his knives restored and his reflexes sharpened, he braces for another round. Vigo sneers, questioning why Dennis is suddenly fighting with such passion. The Dennis he knew was always laid back, never serious enough to risk his life. Even if Dennis has changed, Vigo still calls him a spoiled brat, someone lucky enough to be taken in by a wealthy patron. With that insult, Vigo launches another furious assault. Dennis narrowly dodges, but the relentless barrage begins to wear him down. Desperate, Dennis casts a spell that shrouds the battlefield in thick smoke. Vigo swings wildly through the haze, shouting that he misjudged Dennis all along. When the smoke clears, the clash resumes with even greater ferocity. From the sidelines, Henrietta and the others watch in awe. This is what a battle between two warriors at level 99 looks like, and they are astonished that Dennis is managing to hold his ground against Vigo. But while the others are impressed, Atrielle looks on with deep concern, fearing what will happen if Dennis loses. The fight takes a dire turn when Dennis suffers a devastating blow, sending him flying. With his sense-enhancing magic still active, time seems to slow as he soars through the air. Mid-flight, he reflects on his journey. He knows he must recover before hitting the ground, but even if he does, how can he hope to defeat someone as relentless as Vigo? Dennis admits to himself that while Vigo is infuriating, he is also undeniably strong. He questions how he ended up in this situation when all he ever wanted was simple: to cook, to run his restaurant, and to earn people's trust through food. He thought that by doing so, he would naturally reach level 100. So where did it all go wrong? His thoughts drift to his time as a sous chef at Black's restaurant. He recalls Jean telling him he would never reach level 100, that no matter how hard he tried, his limit was level 99. Dennis had brushed off her words as nonsense, especially since his level had been skyrocketing in recent weeks. He believed he would catch up to Jean soon. But Jean insisted he would need something more, something different. She told him that a half-hearted ruffian like him could never achieve it. When Dennis asked what he needed, she replied that if he couldn't figure it out himself, he would never reach level 100. Back in the present, Dennis lands on his feet. He reminds himself why he became a cook in the first place. It wasn't just because the head chef took him in when he had nowhere else to go. He remembers the day Jean served him the most delicious fried rice he had ever tasted. From that moment on, he wanted to create meals that brought others the same joy. He wanted to serve food that gave people comfort and strength, helping them through hardships and sadness, giving them a reason to smile and carry on. That was why he became a chef. As he realizes this, he briefly loses consciousness, but the voices of his comrades call him back. Seeing the worry on their faces, Dennis knows he must stand and fight. Atrielle cries out for him not to lose, while Vigo charges forward to deliver a fatal blow. Dennis grips his knives, preparing himself. Just before the clash, he recalls another lesson from Jean. She once told him that level 100 isn't something you aim for or become, it's something you are without even realizing it. She explained with the story of the bluebird, which searched the world for happiness, only to discover it was always closer than it thought. Levels, she said, worked the same way. The difference between level 99 and 100 was tiny. It was simply whether what you already possess manifests. Placing a finger on his chest, she told Dennis the key was already in his heart, though he didn't yet know it. Now, on the battlefield, Dennis finally understands. As Vigo leaps into the air for a finishing strike, Dennis blocks it. A rainbow-colored aura bursts forth, surrounding him as his strength surges. Everyone witnesses his transformation as he awakens new power. Dennis realizes that strength alone is not enough, nor is simply making delicious food. He vows to become someone who can protect the smiles of those he loves. His energy builds to its peak, preparing him to unleash a decisive blow against Vigo. Vigo, stunned, stares in disbelief, unable to understand where this overwhelming power has come from. The magical energy swirling around Dennis grew more and more intense, terrifying with every passing second, until the torrent was finally absorbed into him. At last, he had reached the rank of a level 100 adventurer. But even then, Vigo refused to acknowledge that the rival he always dismissed as nothing more than a cook could stand on equal ground. Consumed by fury, he charged. Dennis hardly paid attention to the attack, and nearly brought him down with nothing but a kitchen knife. Vigo managed to block in time, but the blow was so powerful it cracked the ground beneath his feet. Relentless, Dennis forced Vigo out of his restaurant for good, unleashing his skill. Forced shop exit strike. The overwhelming surge of power pinned Vigo to the earth, the crushing weight creating a widening crater under his body. His armor buckled, and he felt as though gravity itself was against him. Yet this was no ordinary force. Watching from the sidelines, Vivia guessed that this was Dennis's unique level 100 ability. As Jean had once explained, a level 100 skill is nothing less than the very reason for a person's existence. Under that pressure, Vigo felt as though space itself was twisting around him, a power that defied every law of nature. It was an absurd ability with an even more absurd name, something he never believed possible. And yet, crushed into the earth, Vigo swore he would not die here. Victory, he told himself, would still belong to him. The surge of magical energy was so great it shot into the skies, visible from the farthest reaches of the city. When the battle finally ended, Dennis had dealt his rival the harshest defeat imaginable. Exhausted, he exhaled, gazing at the aftermath, a massive crater where Vigo now lay motionless. Smoke rose from every part of Vigo's battered body, and his once shining armor looked no better than crumpled tin. Dennis collapsed backward, but Vivia, Henrietta, and Backstabbed rushed to catch him. The children cheered, declaring their chef victorious, though Dennis could only think of a plate of fried rice. Inspired, the kids decided to host a fried rice party in celebration. Dennis insisted that it had to be real fried rice, not some cheap imitation. At that moment, Atrielle appeared with the bracelet she had kept safe for him. She held out her fist, and Dennis bumped it with his own, smiling wide. Jean, proud of what she had seen, left the square with Hezmochi. The criminals behind the restaurant attack were turned over to justice, and Katie, watching Vigo dragged from the crater, finally breathed in relief. Later, over a meal at the Black Restaurant, Katie, now captain of the Silver Wing, confessed to Jean that she had been too afraid to join the fight. Seeing Vigo's strength firsthand, she admitted she had chickened out. If she had rushed in recklessly, she believed she would have been torn apart. She then mentioned that Dennis had reached level 100, a rank so rare only a handful in history had ever achieved it. She wanted to know how he managed it. Jean explained simply, reaching level 100 means finding the reason for your very existence. It isn't about uncovering an existing skill, but manifesting something that only you can bring into the world. Crimson Lightning admitted she didn't understand a word of it. Jean went on, two cooks reaching the peak in the same era might seem like coincidence, but their paths were entirely different. She herself sought the art of perfect cuisine, but Dennis wanted to be the strongest chef, protecting Smiles, and opposing anyone who dared intrude on his restaurant. From that conviction came his ability, the forced shop exit strike. Katie found it ironic that such a power had nothing to do with food. Jean agreed, but insisted that Dennis was one of a kind. Meanwhile, on the balcony of a fine restaurant, Heath enjoyed a salad while Fiorenza stood guard. She refused to eat, saying her duty was to protect him while he dined. When she asked if he was concerned about Vigo and Joseph's defeat, Heath casually dismissed the matter, more interested in the tangy vinaigrette on his sandwich. He explained that people like Vigo were never meant for great things. Fiorenza admitted she hadn't expected Dennis to defeat someone of that level, but Heath calmly replied it was only natural. After all, Dennis was his younger brother. Some time later, Dennis, still recovering from his wounds, received a gift, blueprints for a brand new restaurant. Polvo had called in the Builders Guild to make it a reality. Dennis's excitement quickly faded when he saw the design was completely different from the old shop. The kids explained they wanted a fresh start. Dennis reluctantly agreed, but frowned at some unusual additions. The bathhouse area, taking up nearly the entire layout, was Atelier's idea. The front wall made of glass, Vivia proudly claimed as his contribution. Furious, Dennis shouted that he didn't want a fancy restaurant, but Vivia described a stylish meeting hall to attract adventurers. Dennis was at his limit when he spotted a massive rectangle with a fish drawn in the middle. Henrietta explained it was an aquarium, like the ones in luxury restaurants of the capital, where seafood was kept fresh. Dennis roared that his place would never have such a thing. Then he demanded to know who had added bedrooms underground. That, Backstabbed revealed proudly, was hers. Staff could live and work around the clock. Dennis exploded again, accusing her of carrying over her past suffering into her thinking. Much later, Vivia reflected on everything. Thanks to mages and witnesses, Joseph and the others were arrested. The House of Workstad was left without a leader, but Atrielle refused to take the position. Meanwhile, royal researchers were working to restore the grimoires that had been destroyed. Most importantly, the restaurant had been rebuilt with care and passion. On opening day, Vivia took leave from his party to attend. Henrietta arrived in her knight's uniform, and Backstabbed came as a new teacher at the Royal Capital School. To Vivia, the true lesson Dennis had taught was that no matter how many times people fall, there will always be someone to help them rise again. Standing before Cynthia's grave, he promised to return another day. Meanwhile, Dennis and Atrielle shopped in the market for ingredients. Atrielle was briefly lost in thought when someone brushed past her, but her heart lifted the moment Dennis called her name. Vendors greeted her warmly, recognizing the girl who worked at the region's most famous restaurant. Finally, Dennis placed the sign on the new Outcast's restaurant. He thought the name was harsh, but Henrietta and Backstabbed insisted it was perfect. To his surprise, Atrielle reminded him that the idea had been hers. When Vivia approved as well, Dennis grumbled in defeat. The children rushed him inside, where Dennis revealed he had ignored their absurd blueprint. Atrielle pouted about the missing bathhouse, but Dennis reassured her with a gentle pat, and asked her help in preparing the reopening meal. Their first guests, Henrietta, Vivia, and Backstabbed, placed their orders: katsudon, fried rice with crab, and a shrimp platter. When the dishes were served, their joy was clear. This moment marked the official reopening of the Outcast's restaurant. Dennis realized that thanks to these kids, he hadn't lost the things that mattered most. Soon, more familiar faces arrived to place their orders. Smiling, Dennis welcomed them all back. His work had truly begun again.